In this world, there are those who succeed and those who fail, those who rise to the top and those who lay in the dirt, those who live and those who die. This binary is unavoidable. Even those with the best of intentions often reveal a more self-serving side deep down. It shouldn't be seen as a negative trait, after all. For one to succeed, others inevitably have to fail, and for Yun-Jin Lee, failure is unacceptable. Welcome, my friends, back to the fog. This is a world where the binary of life and death are in constant motion, where vicious killers hunt and slay survivors who are all just fighting to stay alive. Yun-Jin Lee understands better than most that to win at this game of survival, one must be creative, ruthless, and willing to step over others to win. Call her selfish if you like. You'll just be hanging from a hook while you do. Yun-Jin Lee loved music when she was a child. She had several instruments she loved to play on and practice with. But her family was in crippling debt, and in time those instruments were sold in order to pay it off. She became her baby sister's caretaker as her parents worked night and day to pay off their debt. Financial strain, poverty, and desperation taught Yun-Jin that being at the bottom was a place no one should be if they could avoid it, and she would do anything to avoid it. When she turned 17, the famous record agency Mighty One Entertainment did a series of auditions at various schools looking for up-and-coming musical talents. Though Yun-Jin was rejected as a new idol, her musical talents did not go unnoticed. She was brought on as an unpaid intern at the company. There, her talents were used to create some of the biggest hits the company had ever produced, though she was never noticed or given credit for them. To ensure that she was finally recognized, she would often appear in the spotlight wearing flamboyant and extravagant apparel so that no one could look over her, and she would often insert sound bites into songs she produced and edited them to include her name, magnum opus. Fans began to recognize her songs, and eventually she was hired on as a producer for a floundering boy band called No Spin, who were in desperate need of her talent. Yun-Jin Lee could tell that No Spin was going nowhere fast. To help them, she took a risk and hired on the edgy and new talent, Ji-Woon Hak, to add some spice to their music. The result was a smashing success. Ji-Woon was building up the group, and Yun-Jin was finally tasting success. Her lifestyle surged to extravagancy. She was invited to the best parties. She was living in a penthouse suite, and finally living the life of luxury that she'd always dreamed of. However, good things do come to an end, and no one can anticipate the hands of fate. While producing one of No Spin's new songs, the fire alarm went off in the studio. Afraid for her own safety, Yun-Jin fled the studio and ordered an evacuation, only to notice that the rest of No Spin hadn't made it out with her. When the fire died and all was accounted for, only Ji-Woon had survived. The rest of No Spin was gone. Her career was over. The album was ruined, and all of her success would be plucked from her by the vultures of the industry. But not if she could help it. Unknown to Mighty One, Yun-Jin had seen fit to create new tracks to relaunch Ji-Woon's career. She produced a song with him to push his grief and sorrow, and to release a music video that showed him saying farewell to his friends on No Spin. The result was a global sensation. She released the song officially under Ji-Woon's new stage name, The Trickster, which she hoped would continue to push his mischievous but jovial persona and leave audiences in a state of awe but also fear. However, something strange was happening. As she and her star, the Trickster, toured the world, every city they stopped in were met by a series of murders and disappearances. Fearing that the fire and these murders were being caused by a dangerous fan of some kind, she increased the Trickster's security detail and brought them back to Seoul. But that wasn't the only change. A few of his newer songs that the Trickster had been working on were bizarre. He'd always had a flair for the dark or the edgy, but one track she heard incorporated shrieks and screams at the beginning that sounded far too real and unnerving for her taste. The Trickster was beginning to scare Yun-Jin. He couldn't be involved with these murders, could he? If he was, then the scandal would ruin him and her. She tried to pretend it wasn't real. It couldn't be true. She was just nervous about all of her success lately. There's no way it could be so awful, is what she feared. But finally, the studio had had enough. Mighty One told Yun-Jin that the Trickster wasn't turning a profit like they wanted. His dark and violent songs weren't selling well, and his knife trick performances when he did stage shows was getting dangerous. He had 3 months to release a new hit, or they were done. Yun-Jin and the Trickster worked tirelessly for 3 months, and when the day came for the executives to hear his performance, She felt confident until they all sat down in the stage room. Dense smoke filled the room, and as they all breathed in the fumes, their bodies went numb, unable to move. Yun-Jin could only watch as the Trickster, dancing and singing the whole way, hacked up the executives like meat, enjoying the thrill of the kill. But he did not kill her. After all, Yun-Jin was always on his side. She had protected him all these years, helped him get away with every murder. She deserved to die last, to hear the song to its conclusion. Yun-Jin was furious, outraged with herself. She'd known. She'd known all along. The fire where only the Trickster survived, the murders, the scandals. It had always been Ji-woon, the Trickster, and she'd known but tried to deny it. So obsessed with maintaining success and stardom that she denied her instincts and allowed him to get away with it. She pretended that nothing was happening, that nothing was wrong, tried to shove her head in the sand. And now it was over. Her career, Mighty One, all of her friends and colleagues that she'd made, all dead and gone. But Ji-woon would pay. She'd make sure he suffered. As her anger boiled over, black fog swirled around her, calling her to a new world. And as she heard the crowds chant her name, she embraced her anger. She lived for only one thing now, to make the Trickster pay. So, I absolutely love Yun-Jin Lee, okay? I love her lore. She's easily one of the most fascinating survivors out of the cast. In Dead by Daylight, it's common knowledge that survivors have to work together to succeed. It's unavoidable. Teamwork is essential, and as such, most survivors have perks at capitalizing on helping each other, be it healing perks, aura reading perks, gen rushing perks. All these perks and traits are meant to encourage and push altruistic action and teamwork. But Yun-Jin Lee is all about self-preservation, success even at the cost of others. As someone who solo queues quite a lot, her perks are actually incredible for me. If I can't communicate with my team, then I'll just run solo and do everything I can to succeed. And if the others can't keep up, that is on them. The story itself is also rather good. Starting from poverty and desperation, rising to stardom through hard work and tenacity, and the willingness to ignore evil or danger to preserve it, those are relatable things. I mean, think about it. How often have you turned a blind eye to something you know is wrong to keep yourself out of trouble, or pretended like a person you like or know isn't doing something totally bad because it benefits you? Yun-Jin Lee embodies these principles. I think the only issue I have with the whole make the Trickster pay angle is, what does she intend to do? I say this more from a gameplay angle than anything. Survivors can't kill the killers, and they can't really hurt them either other than flashlight stunning them or, hitting them with a pallet, stuff like that. That's all you can really do. So I don't know what she plans to do to make the Trickster pay, but hey, otherwise her lore is pretty top tier. I kind of like the idea of a survivor who really is only trying to look out for herself. And of course, I suppose that does propose the question if she's technically a moral or good person. Obviously, someone's going to ask, okay, if this girl is so willing to step over others to make sure she survives, doesn't that make her more immoral or evil herself? And my response to that is kinda, sorta, not really. It's complicated. First, Dead by Daylight is not a game of morals. It's a game of survival. Yes, ideally the survivors do want to help each other and get points for it. But bear in mind that it's not just to be nice. More survivors on the map means more people able to fix gens and keep the killer busy. Healing survivors and taking hits for them is not only giving you points, but allows for time so other survivors can get away and do tasks. I find it hard to believe that every survivor goes into each trial with complete selfless intentions. I think Yun-Jin Lee is just honest about it. She's going to survive at any cost because that's what it takes. You can either help her out or stay out of her way, and by golly, that's a neat character. Not exactly someone that you would like in real life, not a person that you'd necessarily want to get to know or be friends with, but in terms of just a character, pretty ideal. I like the character. It's a unique take. And like I said earlier, her perks are some of my favorites, so let's get into those. Yun-Jin Lee uses FasTrack, self-preservation, and smash hit. FasTrack is my absolute favorite perk she uses and one of my favorites in the whole game. I run it almost all the time regardless of what survivor I have. Whenever another survivor gets hooked besides yourself, this perk gains 3 tokens up to a maximum of 27 tokens. When you perform a great skill check on a generator, you spend all of your accumulated tokens to add a 1% progression for each token, in addition to the progression bonus gained from a great skill check. That means if you have 15 tokens, you will gain a 15% progression bonus plus the bonus obtained from a great skill check anyway. So your teammate's sacrifice is your gain. I love this perk. And if you combine it with perks like Stakeout, where good skill checks are treated as great skill checks, dude, you can just push gens, man. Self-preservation is also quite useful. If a survivor within 16 meters of you is damaged by a basic or special attack, this perk activates for 10 seconds. In that time, you leave no scratch marks, no grunts of pain, and no pools of blood. Essentially, what this means is that if you are injured and a survivor near you takes a hit, you immediately become harder to detect, meaning the killer is far less likely to target you unless they see you. I know this one is a bit of a cold perk to use, but honestly, it has saved my bacon a few times. And finally, Smash Hit. It's the only one of her perks that I don't get quite as much use out of as I'd like to, but I do like it. When you pallet stun a killer, you gain a 50% haste status effect for 4 seconds, allowing you to get away that much faster. This perk does inflict you with the exhausted ailment for 20 seconds though, so make sure you get away cleanly. All in all, Yun-Jin is probably my favorite survivor. I run her most frequently over all the others, or at least I make sure I'm running at least one of her perks. She's got great lore, great perks, and all around a pretty solid presence. I think the only thing I don't like about her is her fashion sense. Her default look is not that great, and it took me forever for me to find a good look for her. I mean, why does she have to have a potato head with a face like she just chewed too much sour candy? Well, whatever. She's still awesome, and I did eventually find a look that would suit her. But now we are moving on from her to the very killer that put her in this place in the first place. The Trickster Ji-Woon Pak. Yes, that's right. The K-pop boy killer. Yeah. And boy, do I have a lot to say about this guy. But that's for next time in the fog. Take care.